Hey everyone, Julie Bogart here from Brave Writer. It is another week and this is my weekly broadcast. I'm so excited to have you here. Brave Writer is the online writing and language arts program designed for homeschool families, but we also welcome people from all kinds of educational strategies. So even if your kids are in public school or they're part-time enrolled or they go to a junior college or are part of a co-op, Brave Writer has resources, materials, classes, everything you need to enrich your kids' lives and help them be effective writers. I am especially interested in empowering parents to help that job come to pass. Too often we're hands off with writing and we don't realize that we could release power in our children's experience of writing if we understood how to partner with them, how to help them experience their own writing voices. Today, we are talking about homeschooling especially. I like to share ideas for how to help your homeschool hum along. And we've had a lot of requests lately to talk about teenagers. Now, I run an online homeschool coaching group called the Homeschool Alliance. And you can find out more about that by going to coachjuliebogart.com. And this week, we're doing a webinar devoted to the idea of what do we do about all these teens? How do we help them become the educated, well-mannered, responsible adults we're training them to be? So we're going to talk about that in detail in the Homeschool Alliance. We'll address your specific questions. If you've got, a need, like a child who's got ADHD and can't sit still to get that essay written to go to college, what do you do? We're going to talk about all those kinds of specific issues in the Alliance. But what I want to do today is just talk about teens in general and kind of give you a chance to ask some questions and to think about how homeschooling changes when you move from those really fun middlers, 10 to 12 years old, to suddenly the new brave world of 13 to 18. So good morning, everyone. I want to look and just say hello to those of you who hopped on. If you would share this broadcast, that's one way that we grow the Brave Writer audience. And I'm on a mission to grow it, not because of me, but because I really care about what we're doing. Brave Writer represents the belief that what we can all join around is homeschool. Doesn't matter what religious beliefs you have or not. Doesn't matter if you live in the United States, Canada, Australia, or Singapore. What we're interested in is homeschooling and parenting. How do we bring those two things together to create this beautiful dynamic of education and family bonding? And I care about that for everyone. And I feel like we need to shout it from the rooftops that we can do this. We don't have to divide into our little fiefdoms. We can collaborate, and that collective wisdom that comes from the group can be disseminated throughout the world of education and parenting. And that's what I'm about. So if you have a chance and you want to share this with friends, please welcome them into this space. A little background on me. I have 5 kids who are now all adults. They have shot through the teen years. My last child is now 21. So I've been done with the teen years for a year already. And here's what's so fascinating. I remember when my oldest son, Noah, turned 13. And on his birthday, I cried. I don't know if you've gone through this, but I suddenly was like, oh my goodness, we only have 4 more years and then he's out of here. He's going to go to college and he won't be living with me anymore. And it just sounded like 4 years would go by in a flash, which they sort of did. I mean, in hindsight, they really did. But in the lived experience, it was 4 years of a roller coaster ride I hadn't signed up for. I was under this mistaken belief that because I had home birthed and breastfed and baby wore and co-slept and was really touchy-feely in my relationship with my kids, that we were going to somehow like seamlessly move into the teen years and we would be just as close and we would escape all that weirdness that other families talked about, moodiness and kids who disagree with you and arguments. I thought we were so tuned in. We were going to be different than everything I had read out there about, the challenging teen years. I was in for a rude awakening. I have an aunt who was a professor of religion and ethics, a strong idealist. And she used to say this one phrase: idealists are shocked a lot in life. Idealists are shocked a lot in life. So let me just point out that my experience of the teen years was that my ideal of how I thought this parent-child relationship would just emerge from this cocoon of coziness over the 12 previous years, not quite how it turned out, and I was shocked a lot during the teen years of my kids. Now, that's not to say that that foundation we set didn't support us during the teen years. Oh, it totally did. I mean, it was really crucial that I had lots of built up, banked love for my child. Now, hear me when I say that. It wasn't so much that my child had banked a lot of love for me. That wasn't the key here. The key was that I had to be able to look back on just how good it felt to have been close to my child. Because there were moments when he was a teen where I didn't have that same closeness. And I had to remind myself that it would come back, that it would be like one of those, accordions. It would stretch out and then snap back. That there was a reservoir of love and closeness to draw on, that we both knew was there, even on the days when it didn't feel very nearby. Here's what I learned, and I have 5 of these kids, and I went through it 5 times. And fortunately, by child 4 and 5, I was better at it. But here's what I had not prepared myself for. Ready? They change in their teen years. My kids, your kids, teen kids, use the teen years to prove to themselves that they're going to be grown up someday and that they can rely on themselves to do the things they need to do to survive without you. During the teen years, kids suddenly wonder, oh my gosh, if I'm out there on my own, what else do I need to know that my parents haven't told me about? They get curious. They notice for the first time that you're not the sage expert that you've pretended to be. They meet friends and they compare notes. And they start to wonder about the world beyond the house. Now, especially with homeschool, when you have curated this environment so carefully, it can be kind of a shock when they find fault with it. Because after all, your whole aim has been to create a life that would be happy and meaningful to them. But every child has to go through this. Every child has to re-examine the source material of their own childhood. Didn't you? Do you remember being 15, 16, 17? Realizing that your dad's opinion about, this one sports team was really biased? Realizing that your mom's advice didn't really work? We all have that moment. And when the capes come off of our parents and they stand before us as flawed human beings, that's when we first feel the terror of growing up to be an adult and having to make those choices for ourselves. And let me remind you, it is terrifying. They toggle between needing a mommy and wanting nothing to do with you. And they do it in a way that is so infuriating at times because they don't even realize that that's what's going on. They look like they just have a really strong, stupid opinion when really what they're doing is trying to be brave. They're just trying out an idea to see what it feels like to wear the clothes of that imagined outcome for their lives. Wendy says her struggle is that her teen is not finding interest in attending school. Yeah, they might suddenly seem disinterested in the things they always loved. Here's why. Because they're looking for a trigger of excitement. Part of what characterizes the teen life is risk and adventure. And that means you're not along for that ride all the time. They're going to test their wings. Now, we always talk about this notion of kids wanting to become more independent. We have parents who want their kids to be more independent. And then the teens test it and we're like, hey, but not like that. Don't think about those ideas. Don't read those books. Don't listen to that music. Don't hang out with that person. Don't try that drug. we come right back with, well, we want your independence as long as it looks like the safe journey to adulthood I've defined for you, which, if you're honest about it, isn't that independent. So where we're looking then is we want to think about what creates risk and adventure for a teen that feels independent. We don't want to only leave them to their own devices. So if we have a child who's got flagging interest in attending school or doing homeschool, we have to stop and think about, what is the experience of this kid's life? Has he lived in these four walls for his entire life, and now we're saying, keep being interested? Maybe he needs to get out of the house. Or conversely, if he's in school and school has become this flat, dead experience, can we think about it differently? Can we look for opportunities to change up the school experience? And there are many. Part-time enrollment is one option in some school districts. Going to a junior college is one option. Joining a co-op is an option. Taking online classes with like-minded people around things the child really cares about. So maybe he's attending school and just getting by with his standard classes, but at night he can look forward to that photography class online. We want to start putting our kids in the way of excitement. It's comforting to a parent to keep that child under their roof where they're protected from all the evils in the world. But your kids are eventually going to join that group, and they need experience with exploring it. And they need opportunities for excitement. They've got all this, hormonal energy, this vision and spry, limbs to use. And we don't want to just coddle them so completely they never get to break a bone or risk being out at night. Eventually they will be on their own. Back in the dark ages when I was 16, there were no cell phones, but I did have my own car. And I used to take these sort of self-realization workshops in downtown Los Angeles at night at the convention center. I drove from Calabasas, which without traffic is nearly an hour away from the convention center. I drove down there. I parked in the underground, it's not underground, but it's covered parking garage by myself, walked into the convention center and went to these adult meetings. And then when they were over at 11 p.m., I walked back to my car, got in it, and drove home on the freeway. No cell phone. I did that at 16 and 17. Now, I look back on that with a little bit of horror, especially since I got in 5 accidents between 16 and 20. Picturing myself, on the side of the road on the Hollywood freeway by myself at 17 sounds kind of terrifying. But my parents gave me the freedom to spread my wings. And so when my kids came up to teen years and got cars, it suddenly occurred to me, did I have that kind of courage on behalf of my own kids? I remember when Noah and Johanna joined a Shakespeare troupe downtown. They were actors, and they joined a high school Shakespeare acting company, and they drove every Saturday downtown, parked the car, had to walk to the place, downtown, and then walk back to their car, had to trust that this was the right time for them to have that experience, that adventure. And they got to know all these kids who were artsy kids, not homeschoolers, kids from public school, telling them things maybe I had protected them from hearing, listening to language and ideas that were not our families, because they were teens, 17 and 15, 18 and 16. When do they get to test those thoughts and drive a car and be among people that are not like your family? Are we really waiting until they turn 20 or till they leave home for college? So part of what we're looking at when we talk about homeschool and the adventure of being a teen is making sure they have opportunities to explore and expand their sense of competence in the world, self-reliance. If you have a kid who's in the current school and hates it and wants to come home, I would consider having a big, juicy conversation with that teen. We'd go out for dinner at a nice restaurant, just the two of us. I'd bring a notebook and I'd get a pen, and I would say, let's just make one of those crazy brainstorming lists of all the things that you want to do between now and 18. Anything can go on this list. Going to space camp, joining an acting troupe, becoming an indoor rock climber, learning to play the violin, whatever it is, speaking Mandarin Chinese. We're going to get them all on the list. What are the things you want? Maybe they even include things like going on dates, going to the prom. We sometimes forget that our own children have awareness of what typical teens do, and some of them want those experiences. Just because we homeschool doesn't mean that we should ignore those or treat them like they are off the table. Get all the options, the menu of options on the table. You might need to seed some of those ideas. I remember when Liam was in high school, he went to our local high school part-time as a freshman, and then as a sophomore, he started going full-time. He is my 23-year-old son now at St. John's College in Maryland. He's a senior. But when he was in high school, he started really hating it. It just wasn't his thing. But I was not in a situation where I could bring him home at the time. I was going through a divorce, and it just wasn't a good scene for homeschool. So we made a deal. I said to him, let's do as little high school as possible. Let's just get through this. I know you're smart. Let's just get through this. So he stopped taking AP classes and he just took regular classes. He made very good friends with a literature teacher, and they used to read short stories at lunch and discuss them. He did that on his own. He was on the chess club team. He played chess every year for 4 years, ended up being first board by the time he was a senior. He hung out also after school with that teacher just to hang out, and it was his science teacher. So he got through, and by the time he was a senior, we figured out that he could take one class in summer school and he'd be done by his end of his first semester of senior year. So he did 2.5 years of school. And here's what motivated him. His brother Jacob was in Europe as an exchange student in college. And I said to Liam on this list, when we made the big juicy idea list, why don't you go to Europe and visit your brother during your spring semester of your senior year of high school? But you won't be able to get there unless you finish the classes. So it meant taking this summer school class and then completing in the fall. And you know what? He worked a job to save the money. He took the summer school class and he completed in the fall. And during his senior year, the spring semester, when everybody else is still in school, he wasn't. He worked and he went to Europe for a whole month. And then he came back and he went through graduation with his friends. Now, to me, that's meeting the need of a teenager. He ended up having this amazing experience traveling around Europe. He saw his brother. He went and visited an online friend in Croatia. He also went and stayed with my aunt in Italy for 2 weeks and hung out with his cousins. That's what we're talking about. Can you reconceive of life for your teenager in a way that's meaningful to them, that honors who they are? He didn't really need AP classes. He wasn't interested in traditional college. He took a whole year off after college and wound up going to a non-traditional university that didn't even care about grades. And right now he's killing it. He's writing his senior paper. It's his 4th year. He studied abroad in college. You can do this differently. You are not beholden to the structures and strategies that everybody else is using. What you want to do is tune back into that teenager on their terms. Now, when they're babies, they're tuning into you on your terms. The big shift for every parent is when your child hits 13, they get to have an increasingly large say in their lives. And we have to get comfortable with it. We have to get comfortable with it. They get to have a say. And we won't always like the say they have, you know? So one of the things that you want to do as you are working with your teens is get comfortable with them taking a risk, something not working out, and then you regrouping and trying again. Don't assume that there is one path forward that your teen is going to take and everybody will approve of it. You need to be willing to be flexible and to let your kids have a little leash, a little rope. Let them go out there a little bit. Let them explore and find out what they think, what they feel, what they want. They can't know without some risk and adventure. Yeah, Lori, I love that. It's their homeschool too. It is their homeschool too. Are there any questions? I'd be curious to hear what you're experiencing in your homeschools. One of the things that was a big discussion point in ours had to do with movies and music and what they were allowed to look at online and which games they were allowed to play. And that was hard for me. You know, when my kids were little, they just went along with the program. They just watched the shows we watched, played the games we bought, listened to the music we enjoyed. For high schoolers, that shifts. Who's in charge? What does collaboration look like? We're going to talk about a lot of this at the Homeschool Alliance this week, so I'll save more of that discussion and stories for that. But I want you to remember that this is a shift in responsibility. It's the beginning of choosing to let your kids make big mistakes, do things you don't agree with, find out ideas that you were hoping would stay off the table a little longer. Noelle says, I have a very intense, emotional 15-year-old son who is healing, opening, but still more afraid to try new things, go places. Yeah, so for some homeschool kids, they haven't had as much opportunity to explore as they maybe could have because they've been home with you and comfortable. So team them up, find a buddy, have them not go alone. You know, when Noah and Johanna joined that acting company, they did it together. They can go with a sibling, they can go with another homeschool friend, they can join an organization where the parent and child does it together. I remember when I was at the rock climbing gym where I fatefully broke my ankle in September, seeing so many parents and young people together in that gym. Could you go on a backpacking trip together, teens and parents? There's nothing wrong with partnering in these adventures, especially initially. You know, when our son started listening to music that was not on our typical radar, we listened together. That's a way to start to build that bridge. And you don't have to push them out of the nest. You can escort them out of the nest. You can give them some opportunities to see that there's a world bigger than the house they're in. You know, they don't have to sign up for full-time high school. Maybe they just go to one class a day plus lunch to see what it feels like before they try the whole thing. If they have curiosity about school, can you give it to them in a small dose rather than all at once? Part of what you want to do is open that world for them, open that door. Notoriously, a lot of homeschool kids don't want their licenses the day they turn 16. I've heard this many times, the driving license. And here's what I think it is. They can't imagine where they'd go. You know, they're going to co-op, they're going with you to the store, they're staying home. Where would they drive? What would they be excited to drive to? We need to open that door for them. And part of that comes through our courage to risk that with and for them. You know, joining a sports team or a gymnastics organization, taking art lessons. One of the benefits of homeschooling teens is that they can often join up with adult programs. When Johanna got really fascinated with vintage dance, she and Noah took lessons together with an adult company. They were the only two kids there. Johanna was 11 and Noah was 13. And this adult group let them join because they were excited to pass on their love of vintage dance to the next generation. Cindy, who works for us in customer service and operations, her son Andrew took art classes with the Art Institute of Cincinnati and downtown at the Art Museum with adults. You can certainly put your kids out there. It doesn't only have to be teen-oriented experiences. This is one of the benefits of having a homeschooled child. They can go to the observatory and get to know hobbyist astronomers who are in their 60s. There's nothing that says their adventure must be limited to fellow teens. I also really love this idea of collaborating in your homeschool groups. So, you know, co-op classes, we held a book club in our house. My kid's dad was a literature professor at Xavier University. And so Johanna invited all these teens over to her house and they would discuss books once a month. So they would read the book on their own, and then they would come and have brownies and sit in the living room and have this really cool, deep intellectual conversation with Johanna's dad. They loved it, especially the boys. You know, they weren't used to hearing literature discussed by an adult man. They had mostly been homeschooled by mothers. So these are ways that you can expand the category for your child. Get them out there, out from under your constant supervision. Let them explore their own thoughts, their own ideas, their own perspective in the company of other people. That's the kind of thing you want to do for teens. I'm looking at some of these other comments here. You know, one of the things about that transition is that you're going through a change too. Usually parents of teens are shocked initially because during the baby years, toddler years, middler years, your sense of innocence in the world was just refreshed. Imagine how you, in your own life, you started as a baby and then you became a young child and then a teen and then college possibly, and then out in the world and married. And by the time you're married, you've already made this journey where you slowly gave up that innocence. You know, you learned about the birds and the bees and you've lived them, right? You got married, you had kids. And so when the babies start coming, suddenly it's like this refreshment of innocence. You know, you love watching Disney movies. You think Sesame Street is the cutest show ever designed and you're so touched by all the storylines. You listen to, you know, Raffi's songs and you sing them. And everything about it, you know, you explore pill bugs and ladybugs. And when your child says their first knock-knock joke, you're just blown away at how clever they are. There is this sense of refreshment that comes in this politically weary world. And children bring that to you. When your teens start to be curious about that world, it's a loss as a parent. It's a loss. You were taking this, you know, break from everything being complex and dark and worrying, you know? You were able to just sort of embrace the simple pleasures of childhood and the things about life that tickle you and help you feel open to the world. And then your teens come along and they sort of stomp on that. They're like, all right, Raffi was good, but hey, I really like Metallica. And you're like, oh no, I don't want my 13-year-old to know about all that stuff. But they have to. And that's what happens. You find that you are now being ushered into their changed interests and their, you know, integration into that bigger story. So here's what I like to remind parents of teens. Refreshed innocence goes with the baby years, the young years, but a refreshed sense of your own personhood and gravitas comes with teens. It's the time when you reawaken some of that sensuality, some of that sense of mattering in the world, of having a purpose and a mission. That comes too with your teens. And it's timed well, because most of us by then are in our 40s, and that is a really great time for you to suddenly emerge again from the cocoon of the young years. So give into it a little bit. Allow yourself to be drawn along with your child and carve out some time to be an awesome adult. It will help you. My sister took up surfing when she turned 40. She had been living in Santa Cruz for years, decades. Her husband was a surfer. She hadn't surfed. And yet she had been a complete fish when we were young. She swam, she was a high diver, she loves the ocean. And as her kids hit the teen years, she suddenly realized, well, I can surf. And now she's just an insanely committed surfer. Perfect, perfect. When my kids hit the teen years, we got into ushering at these Shakespeare events, at these Shakespeare plays, which led to this fabulous experience of the Shakespeare Company, the equity actors, the training, the opportunity to perform on a real stage. So allow there to be this dialogue between your refreshed adulthood and their adventure into the teen life. That is what helps you get over that hurdle. And if you have more than 2 kids, you'll get better at it. You know, by the time I was on my 4th and 5th kid, I just loved the teen years. I really came to value them and enjoy them thoroughly. So, you know, initially it's dangerous feeling, but you'll get comfortable again. It's sort of like you've been playing in, you know, the lapping waves of a lake, and then suddenly you're like plunged into the ocean where the waves are bigger. Pretty soon you'll be body surfing again. It's just an adjustment, you know, and it's a little colder. It's not quite as warm as the jacuzzi you're used to. Yeah. How would you tackle a very reluctant learner, almost a teen? As fun as you're trying to make it all, they are not interested. Yes, because they're not interested in you making it fun for them anymore. This is where you really need to go out with your teen and brainstorm the big, hairy, audacious goals for them that they have. I recommend joining the Alliance and coming for this webinar this week, because we're going to go into this in depth. We're going to talk about what to do with the media. We're going to talk about how to make the learning adventure an adventure again, how to move from tabletop learning to that big, full-bodied investment that is necessary as you're becoming a teen and an adult. I'm going to sign off now. We've been at this for a half hour. Thank you for joining me for my weekly broadcast. I will be back next Monday. I look forward to seeing you then. Today, a brand new podcast dropped. Stephanie Elms, one of our Homeschool Alliance coaches, is the guest on the podcast. She is a 25-year veteran of home education and talks about teens on the podcast, so you'll want to hear her talk about that. And I'm also on Free Homeschool 101 on Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern, where I will be talking about transcription skills, language arts, and the mechanics of writing. So if you're interested in hearing how Brave Writer teaches those, be sure to join the Free Homeschooling 101 page and follow me there so that you can see the live broadcast. Seems like all I do anymore is broadcast, podcasts, and writing. I'm very excited about that. I'm also lining up my 2018-2019 homeschool speaking schedule. If you are, you know, the member of a board of any of those homeschool conferences or conventions or workshops and you would like to have me speak, now's the time to get me on your schedule because my calendar is already filling up. So I look forward to being a part of your lives in whatever way suits you. Thank you for joining me today to hear about teens. Go forth, love your teens. Don't be afraid. Join them in the adventure of living. Have a good day, everyone. Bye.